Welcome back to Carneades.org. Today we're going to be continuing with our series, Dumbfounding Definitions, Dizzying Distinctions, and Diabolical Doctrines, a series sorting through some of the jargon of philosophy. In this video, we are going to be looking at what is anti-natalism. Now, anti-natalism. So, simply put, anti-natalism is the philosophical position that procreation, making new people, is morally wrong. Anti-natalism can broadly be divided into two categories: local anti-natalism and global anti-natalism. In this video, we will briefly explain and offer arguments for and against each type. So, local anti-natalism is the arguably less controversial of the two positions. The local anti-natalist claims that there are certain situations where procreation is wrong. There are certain people that just shouldn't have children. This might be, for example, when parents lack the means, skills, or environment to properly raise a child. The argument might go something like this. There are situations where a child being brought into the world will do more harm than good, either to that child or to the rest of the world, and so on and so forth. Taking an action that does more harm than good is wrong. Therefore, there are situations where bringing a child into the world is wrong. Now, there are a number of people that might also say, well, people have a right to have children, and that right would supersede any kind of harm that's done, but I have a different kind of objection, because personally, I have some problems with the kind of epistemic assumptions present in this claim, which are going to be unique to the local version and not really play on the global version as much. It seems to me that parents cannot know all of the possible positive and negative impacts a child may have on the world, or what they will experience. For example, just because a child is born into extreme poverty, it doesn't mean that that child is going to have a life full of pain and is going to cause pain to others. That child, in fact, may grow up to move past that poverty and actually help others to move out of that poverty just because they were born in that situation. And just because a child is born in a very positive environment to a wealthy family of privilege doesn't mean that that child is going to lead a pain-free life or is going to be in a situation where they're actually going to help people. They, in fact, arguably might be more likely to do harm to others. So I would be very skeptical of any kind of rule of thumb, much less a law, which refers to be able to determine whether a child will have a good life before they're born. It seems that we can argue and debate a lot on even whether someone has had a good life after they've died and we have all the information about their life, much less trying to argue about whether they're going to have a good life before they are born. Now, global antinatalism, on the other hand, puts forward a more expansive and controversial claim. According to the global antinatalist, procreation is wrong in general. This might be, as David Benatar argues, because life brings both hurt and happiness, both pain and pleasure, and harm is bad, pain is bad, yet non-existence brings neither, and so is not bad, and it's better for us to stop bad things than to allow a few good things and a lot of bad things on top of it. And therefore, non-existence is in fact preferable, and a better thing to do, a greater moral good. There's also the claim that humans cause harm to each other and the world, and therefore creating more humans is unethical. So we have both the claim that if you create someone, they're probably going to experience more pain than pleasure, and even if they don't, that pain is going to be a worse situation in being in any pain than having experienced no pain at all. And the claim that even beyond that person's individual experience, odds are people are going to do more harm in the world than good, and so it would seem that we shouldn't add more humans to the world. Concerns about overpopulation and the environment can come in here from different angles. There's a lot of different kinds of global antinatalists, and they're defined by their specific positions of how they defend global antinatalism. Furthermore, it has been asserted that we have a duty perhaps to adopt instead of making our own children, since we can do more good this way. And I'm going to go into that a little bit more at the end of the video. Now, the Argentinian philosopher Julio Cabrera frames this discussion in terms of what he calls negative ethics. He claims that our focus in ethics is often on how we should live, when in fact we should be asking the question, should we live at all? Traditional ethics, according to Cabrera, kind of presupposes that there is a value on life, that life is inherently valuable, that life is inherently good, even if life kind of sucks. And so, according to Cabrera, if we can't live a good life or we can't live a pleasurable life, it's wrong to bring life about at all. According to Cabrera, a true assessment of the value of existence and non-existence will find existence wanting, due in part to pain that exists and pain kind of overcoming pleasure, but also due to the fact that all life must end, and putting someone in a state of being alive but realizing that they're going to die actually does more harm than good. So Cabrera would argue along the kind of lines of global anti-natalism that we shouldn't bring life into the world at all. Now, I have a couple objections to this position, and once again, they're going to kind of come from a almost skeptical epistemic point of view, because I'm going to be skeptical of the claim that it is in some way impossible to have more pleasure than pain or to live a good life, or that it's even more likely than not that you'll have more pain than pleasure or you'll live a bad life. It seems to me that while some people do have more pain in their lives than pleasure and cause more harm than they prevent, there are also some people that live very happy lives or cause a great deal more pleasure than pain. I think there's a lot of arguments that can be made for you can't really understand certain pleasures unless you have experienced a pain, along maybe the Epicurean lines of pleasures in fact just being a relief of pains, and that pain is in fact inherently important to pleasure, and we want pleasure so we really want pain as well. And it seems to me that any universal claim that no life can be good or happy is going to be utterly unjustified. It seems that claiming that because any life is going to be more pain than pleasure, or any life is going to have sufficient amount of pain such that non-existence would be better, I think that that's unjustified. It seems to me that in some situations, not all but some, pleasure can balance out pain. And because we can't really know what a particular situation is going to be ahead of time, I don't think they've fully justified this claim. However, I will admit that I think Cabrera does make a good case for questioning whether creating life is an inherently good act. That does seem to be something that theoreticians of ethics presuppose, and it seems that they always assume that life is good and don't always look at the standards of living that are as a part of that. However, it seems to me that he falls short of demonstrating that it's inherently bad, that life is inherently problematic or bad. And you can argue that claim back and forth, but I think the point that he makes that's very salient is we can't assume it either way. We have to be skeptical and question it. One last piece on adoption. So that said, it does seem that in the light of the kind of neutrality of creating life, one could make a strong argument for adoption, especially if you're maybe persuaded by some of the ideas in anti-natalism, but you don't want to go cold turkey and just kind of have the human race die off. If we frame the discussion not merely in terms of bringing life into the world or not, but rather in terms of raising new life with similar DNA to yourself, or raising life that already existed but had slightly different DNA, I think a strong case can be made that the former is wrong so long as the latter exists as an option. As long as you accept at least some of kind of the basic tenets or the basic ideas behind anti-natalism which question the inherent good in bringing life into the world. As long as there are people who already exist, whose lives would be made better by your raising them, foster kids, it seems wrong to make a new person who would do no more good in the world than the foster kids would, and could potentially create as much harm as the foster kids would, than to potentially eliminate the harm of a child being raised by no one and create no new life. You're not netting any more good or bad from your raising the child, but you're getting rid of the harm that would be done to that child by not having a family to raise them. An adopted child will certainly do better than if they had not been adopted, but there's no guarantee that anyone will do better than they would if they had not existed, and therefore had no pain or pleasure. So if we take the stance that Cabrera, for example, has made the case that at least life should be neutral, not considered something good, but he hasn't made the case that it should be considered something bad, it seems that one could make a strong case for adopting, and in fact for saying that if you don't adopt, maybe you're doing something wrong. What do you think? Is it sometimes wrong to have children? Maybe is it always wrong to have children? If there are children to be adopted, is it wrong to ignore them and give birth to one of your own? Write your answers in the comments below. Watch this video and more here at Carneades.org, and stay skeptical, everybody.